There's a place in London where some of the world's most dangerous people simply disappear. A fortress where terrorists, spies, and master criminals vanish behind walls so thick, so secure, that escape is almost impossible. This isn't a castle from some dark fantasy story. This is real, and its name is Belmarsh. But what really happens inside its walls? Why do some people call it Britain's Guantanamo Bay? Today, we're going inside one of the most secretive prisons in the world, and what you're about to discover might just shock you. Picture this. You're driving through southeast London, past normal houses, shops, and people living their daily lives. Then, suddenly you see it, rising from the ground like a concrete monster. Walls that stretch into the sky, watchtowers with guards looking down, and fences topped with razor wire that glints in the sun like metal teeth. This is His Majesty's Prison Belmarsh. From the outside, it looks like something from a war movie. Opened in 1991, it was built for one purpose: to lock away the worst of the worst from society. Belmarsh is what they call a Category A prison. That's the highest security level in the entire British system. Category A means the people inside are considered so dangerous that if they ever escaped, the public would be in grave danger. We're talking about convicted terrorists, organized crime bosses, and spies who betrayed their country. But here's where it gets truly intense. Inside Belmarsh, there's a prison within the prison. A secret section called the High Security Unit, or HSU. The HSU is like a maximum security vault. Only the most high-risk individuals end up there. Imagine waking up in a tiny cell with bare walls, a bed, a toilet, and a small window that lets in just a sliver of light. You're locked in this room for 22 hours a day. For the other 2 hours, you might get to exercise, but not outside in the fresh air. You're taken to another enclosed concrete yard with walls so high you can barely see the sky. You walk in circles, alone, while cameras record your every move. This is life in the HSU. Prison officials say it's for safety, to prevent attacks or escape plans. But here's the controversy. Many people in the HSU haven't even been convicted of a crime yet. They're on remand, waiting for trial. In our legal system, you're innocent until proven guilty. But in the HSU, you're treated like the most dangerous person in the country before a jury ever hears your case. This led to a massive scandal in the early 2000s. After the September 11th attacks, the UK government passed laws allowing them to lock up foreign terror suspects indefinitely, without trial. And where did they send them? You guessed it, Belmarsh. 9 men were held, uncharged, for years. The isolation was so extreme that some suffered severe mental breakdowns. Human rights groups were furious, nicknaming Belmarsh Britain's Guantanamo Bay. Britain's highest court eventually ruled the detention was illegal, but the damage to Belmarsh's reputation was done. Over the years, Belmarsh has held some of the most infamous names in the news. People like the radical cleric Abu Hamza, the extremist preacher Anjem Choudary, and Michael Adebolajo, one of the men who murdered soldier Lee Rigby on a London street. More recently, it was home to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who spent years in the HSU fighting extradition. Reports say the isolation nearly broke him. For the general population outside the HSU, daily life is a strict, monotonous routine. Wake up at 7. Basic breakfast. Then work or education. Some clean, some work in the kitchens, others learn basic skills like reading or math. Why educate them? Because most will eventually be released, and giving them skills reduces the chance they'll reoffend. After a simple lunch, it's back to work. In the evening, there's a bit of association time to socialize, watch TV, or use the phone before being locked back in their cells by 9. It's boring, repetitive, and designed to be a punishment. But it also highlights the complex challenge of our prison system. How do you punish the dangerous while also preparing them to one day rejoin the world? This is just a glimpse into the reality of HMP Belmarsh, a place of secrets, controversy, and some of the most dangerous stories you'll ever hear. If you found this fascinating, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. And drop a comment below. Are high-security prisons like this too harsh or not harsh enough? Let's talk about it. Is Belmarsh Prison actually doing its job? Is it making our society safer, or is it just making things worse? Let's start with the violence. In 2022, there were 314 assaults in Belmarsh. That's nearly one every single day. Some of these were prisoner-on-prisoner fights over disrespect, stolen property, or gang rivalries. Others were direct attacks on staff, prison officers getting punched, kicked, or worse. So why is there so much violence? When you pack dangerous people into tight spaces, tensions are bound to explode. Add to that the sheer frustration of being locked up for years, which can drive anyone to their breaking point. Many prisoners also have untreated mental health problems. And then, there are the drugs. Yes, even in one of Britain's most secure prisons, drugs find a way in. They're smuggled by visitors, brought in by corrupt staff, and even dropped over the walls by drones. The creativity of criminals is endless. These drugs fuel chaos, leading to unpredictable violence and more debt-related attacks. It's not just violence against others. Self-harm has also skyrocketed. In 2022 alone, Belmarsh saw 223 incidents of self-harm, prisoners cutting themselves, attempting suicide, or banging their heads against walls. This level of despair is a direct result of the prison environment, the isolation, the violence, the absolute hopelessness. It's no wonder official inspectors have raised serious concerns about prisoners being locked in their cells for too long, the constant violence, and the lack of mental health support. The government has promised improvements, more staff, better mental health services, new programs to reduce violence. But changing a place like Belmarsh is like trying to turn around a giant ship in a storm. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Despite all this, many prison officers at Belmarsh are dedicated professionals. They are regular people working in one of the most stressful environments imaginable. They deal with violence daily and see things that give them nightmares, all for relatively modest pay. Some even become mentors, trying to help prisoners turn their lives around. But there's a dark side. A few officers have been caught bringing in contraband for money, and there are allegations of mistreatment and racism. This all leads to a bigger question. What is the point of prison? Is it for punishment, rehabilitation, or just to protect society by locking dangerous people away? Belmarsh focuses on security and punishment, but rehabilitation often gets left behind. But most of these prisoners, even the most dangerous, will one day be released. Will they come out better or worse than when they went in? That's the question nobody seems to have a good answer to. Belmarsh isn't just a building. It's a world with its own rules, its own culture, and its own secrets. And some of those secrets are darker than you can imagine. Let's talk about something news reports rarely cover, something that makes Belmarsh even more unsettling than you imagine. The sounds. Former prisoners say the noise is one of the worst parts. The constant, heavy clanging of metal doors. The haunting echo of footsteps in long, empty corridors. Shouting that bounces off concrete walls at all hours. The sharp buzz of electronic locks. The jangling of keys on an officer's belt. And then there's the screaming. Sometimes it's pure anger, a prisoner just yelling at the top of their lungs. Sometimes it's pain, someone being restrained during a violent incident. And sometimes it's just raw despair, a man who's just received terrible news from home, completely breaking down. The sounds never stop. Even at night, Belmarsh is never truly quiet. One former prisoner described it like living inside a machine. Everything is hard, cold, mechanical. No softness, no gentle sounds. Just steel, concrete, and constant, grinding noise. But it's not just the sound. It's the smell. Hundreds of men living in close quarters with limited ventilation and shared toilets. The smell of institutional food, strong cleaning chemicals, sweat, and fear. It's an odor that seeps into your clothes, your hair, your skin. Ex-prisoners say it can take weeks after release to finally feel like you've washed it away. Now, you might be thinking, so what? They're criminals, they deserve it. And maybe that's a fair point for some. But here's the catch. Not everyone in Belmarsh has been convicted of a crime. Many are on remand, just waiting for their trial. Legally, they're innocent until proven guilty. But they're living in the exact same conditions as convicted murderers and terrorists. Is that justice? Let's move on to something even more disturbing. Radicalization. When you put extremists together in one place, they don't just sit there quietly. They talk. They share their ideologies. They actively try to recruit others to their cause. Some experts have called Belmarsh a breeding ground for extremism. Terrorist prisoners have been caught trying to radicalize other inmates, holding secret meetings, passing notes, using coded language. Think about this. Regular criminals who went to Belmarsh for things like theft or drug dealing have come out as radicalized extremists. They went in as one person and came out as someone far more dangerous, believing in violent jihad. The prison service knows this is a huge problem. They try to separate the most dangerous individuals, monitor conversations, and train staff to spot the signs. But it's nearly impossible to stop completely. Ideas spread like a virus. And here's the question that keeps security services up at night. What happens when these radicalized prisoners get released? Because most of them will be. Even terrorists don't always get life sentences. After 10, 15, or 20 years, they're back on the streets. Did their time in Belmarsh make them better? Or did it make them worse, and even more dangerous than when they went in? Consider the story of Usman Khan. In 2017, he was released from Belmarsh after being convicted of terrorism offenses. He'd gone through de-radicalization programs, and experts assessed him as safe to release. 2 years later, he attended a prisoner rehabilitation event in London. He was there as a supposed success story. And then he attacked, stabbing 2 people to death and injuring 3 others before being shot dead by police. The country was horrified. He had seemed reformed. He was being monitored. But it was all a lie. He was just playing the system, waiting for his chance. This tragedy raises a massive question about prisons like Belmarsh. Does locking someone up in harsh conditions with other extremists make them less dangerous, or more? If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Should terrorists ever be released from prison? Or should they be locked up forever? Let's get a discussion going. Now let's talk about the invisible victims, the families. When someone goes to prison, their whole family is sentenced with them. Wives suddenly raising children alone. Parents who cry themselves to sleep wondering where they went wrong. Children who grow up without a father. Visiting Belmarsh is an ordeal. First, security clearance can take weeks. Then you travel to the prison, go through security stricter than in airports, with metal detectors, drug dogs, and pat-downs. Finally, you get to the visiting room. But you can't hug properly. You talk across a table with officers watching your every move. For families visiting the high-security unit, it can be even worse, with visits happening behind glass, talking through a phone. No touch at all. Imagine being a child and only seeing your dad through a window, not understanding why you can't hug him. Some families just stop visiting. It's too hard, too painful, too expensive. And when that happens, prisoners lose their last connection to the outside world. They lose hope. And without hope, what's the reason to change? But not all stories from Belmarsh are tragedies. Some prisoners do change. There are education classes, therapy sessions, and restorative justice programs where prisoners can meet their victims to understand the harm they caused. Some discover talents they never knew they had, like writing or art. When these men are released, some become mentors, warning kids not to make their mistakes. These are the success stories that give us hope. But they are the minority. The reoffending rate in Britain is shockingly high, which tells us that prison alone doesn't fix people. So what does? That's the million-dollar question that even Belmarsh struggles to answer. We've talked about the darkness inside Belmarsh, but there's so much more to this story. We haven't talked about the moments when light breaks through, or the people fighting to make things better, or the question that haunts everyone involved. Can a place like Belmarsh ever truly be fixed? Let's start with something you might not expect: escape attempts. You'd think a fortress like Belmarsh would be impossible to break out of. And you'd be wrong. Prisoners have tried, getting incredibly creative in the process. Back when Belmarsh first opened in the 90s, IRA prisoners in the high-security unit had a clever plan. Security found bars of soap in their cells with perfect impressions of the cell keys pressed into them. They had created molds. If they'd made actual keys, they could have just walked out. But they were caught, and every lock in the prison was changed overnight. Since then, the high-security unit has lived up to its reputation. Nobody has ever successfully escaped from it. But that doesn't stop people from trying elsewhere. Remember Daniel Khalife? In 2023, this former soldier, accused of spying, was waiting for trial in another prison. One morning, he strapped himself underneath a food delivery truck using bedsheets and just drove out. For 3 days, the entire country was on high alert. When they finally caught him, where did they send him? You guessed it, Belmarsh. The authorities weren't taking any more chances. Khalife's story shows the desperation some prisoners feel, and it's exactly why places like Belmarsh exist. Some people need maximum security, not because they're violent, but because they're clever and determined to get out. Now, let's talk about the guards. Imagine going to work every day knowing any moment could turn violent. That's the reality for prison officers at Belmarsh. One officer, just 23 years old, responded to 2 violent incidents in her first 3 months. A former officer from another high-security prison talked about the constant fear of what they call a sugaring, when prisoners mix boiling water with sugar and throw it at people. The sugar makes it stick to the skin like napalm, causing horrific burns. Despite these dangers, and the low pay and massive stress from staff shortages, they keep showing up. In 2022, on the day a prisoner escaped from Wandsworth, 39% of the prison's officers were absent. When that many staff are missing, security suffers. Belmarsh faces the same problems. Activities get canceled, and prisoners get locked down, which breeds frustration and violence. It's a vicious cycle. Of course, not every officer is a hero. Some have been jailed for smuggling drugs, others accused of using excessive force. The truth is, prison can bring out the worst in everyone, guards included. But here's something beautiful found in this ugly place. In 2009, workers digging on the prison grounds discovered a wooden trackway nearly 6,000 years old. Ancient people had built a path across what was once a marsh. Think about that. Before the pyramids, people walked this land, building something that would last for millennia. Now, on that same ground, we lock away our most dangerous criminals. It's a powerful reminder that Belmarsh, too, is temporary. So, is the prison getting better or worse? Reports from 2021 were bleak. High violence, poor mental health support, and prisoners locked in cells for 22 hours a day. By 2024, things had slightly improved. Violence stabilized and education got better. But huge problems remain. Most prisoners still have nothing to do all day, self-harm is high, and the system is overwhelmed. The government is trying to fix it with new scanners and more staff, but you can't put a band-aid on a broken system. The real problem is a backed-up justice system that uses Belmarsh as a warehouse for human beings, waiting years for trial. This leads to something called moral injury. It's what happens when you're forced to violate your own moral code. Imagine being a guard who wants to help people change, but the system forces you to just lock doors and watch people deteriorate. That idealism slowly dies. It affects both prisoners and staff. And here's the final, unsettling question. What happens when these prisoners are released? Because most of them will be. Does a place like Belmarsh make them better, or does it make them more damaged and dangerous? Research shows that harsh conditions often make crime worse. We need to ask ourselves if this is truly the best way. If this made you think, hit that subscribe button. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. What needs to change about how we handle crime and punishment? We keep doing it. We keep locking people up in terrible conditions and expecting them to come out better. It just doesn't make sense. Our justice system often runs on fear, not logic. Politicians win by being tough on crime. No one gets elected by saying, let's treat prisoners with more humanity. So the cycle continues. Crime, arrest, trial, prison, release, and then, too often, crime again. Belmarsh Prison sits at the very center of this cycle. It takes society's most challenging individuals and holds them in conditions that can make them even worse. Then, it releases them back into society, and we wonder why crime rates don't fall. But here's where it gets interesting. Against all odds, some prisoners do change. Despite the violence, the isolation, the hopelessness, some people inside Belmarsh find a way to transform. They take education classes and discover they're smart. They read books and expand their worldview. They confront their demons with therapists. When these prisoners get out, they become mentors, warning kids about the consequences of crime, helping others find jobs and housing. These are the success stories nobody talks about because they don't fit the simple monsters who see a "ain't change" narrative. It's easier to believe that because it justifies the harsh treatment and makes us feel safe. But the truth is more complicated. People are complicated. Some may be beyond redemption, but others deserve a second chance. Belmarsh holds all types: the broken, the dangerous, the desperate. So, let's try a thought experiment. Imagine you're in charge of Belmarsh, with an unlimited budget and total authority. What would you do? Would you make it harsher? Or would you make it more humane, with more counselors and programs? There's no easy answer. You're balancing punishment against rehabilitation, security against humanity. Every choice affects lives. Belmarsh is a monument to this impossible dilemma. Its walls contain Britain's most dangerous people. Inside, as you watch this, life goes on. Someone is planning violence. Someone is praying for release. Someone is breaking down, and someone else is finding strength. Belmarsh isn't just one thing. It's a fortress, a punishment, a necessary evil, a moral failure, and sometimes a success story. Ultimately, it's a mirror. It reflects our society's values, our fears, and our hopes. When you look at Belmarsh, you're not just seeing a prison. You're seeing who we are, how we treat those who've wronged us, and what we believe about redemption. As long as there are terrible crimes, there will be places like Belmarsh. Thank you for watching. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Remember, the world is more complicated than we like to admit. Stay curious and stay questioning.